Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Product Design podcast. For those of you who don't know or couldn't guess by the title, this is a series of talks where I'll be picking the brains of industry experts exploring different topics within product and design. I have the pleasure of being joined by Guilherme Simões, and today we'll be exploring the two main topics of being a hiring manager during hypergrowth phases and why the design market is so competitive right now. Guilherme, again, pleasure to have you on here. Please could you start just by giving a quick overview of you and your career so far?
For sure. Thanks, Matt, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. I think it's a really important topic to discuss. I think I don't see enough people, talking about the design industry and how tricky it can be sometimes. So a little bit of introduction on my side. I've been working as a designer for about 15 years now. On the last 3 years, I've been working as a design manager in a fairly large company. And so I've learned a lot about the craft, for sure, like working for 13 plus years on that. And then I switched into like people management stuff. So it was really, really like a big shift in my career. I've learned so much about what makes designers do their work properly, and what makes designers excited about the work, and how to retain possibly designers as well. So I think it's a very very good topic to discuss. I hope I can help.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to very quickly before we jump in, just talk about your transition from coming over to Germany and working in the German market as well. How did you find that transition from your home country over to working in Germany?
So I'm originally from Brazil, and I mostly worked there in the Brazilian industry, the Brazilian market. At some point, I really wanted to have an experience working abroad and working with more multicultural teams and stuff like that. And I was following up my engineer friends, and they were like trying to get jobs and finding jobs outside of Brazil. At the beginning, I think a lot in Latin America and then the US, and then certain countries were opening themselves more for foreigners or for people to join as immigrants. So with design, I think it was a bit tricky. Let's say 4 or 5 years ago, because of visa issues. Normally, it's not that easy to get a skilled migration visa as a designer, because we were not perceived as a necessary skill, so to speak. So engineering and medical skills, like of course, like if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, if you are a nurse, you do have a lot more opportunities to migrate to another country. But then I started researching, and I had opportunity to work remotely from Brazil to another company based in Ireland. And it was such an amazing experience, mostly like working with people from everywhere. And I got hooked. I just needed to work more on that type of environment. And at that point, I was pretty exhausted with my current work back then. And my wife also, she's a designer as well. She also wanted an experience somewhere else. I think it was a great moment for both of us. And I just started researching and talking to some recruiters, and I've learned that the hot cake, the hot place to be, it would be Berlin. I think Berlin was opening itself a lot. I think 4, 5, 6 years ago, and now it's just crazy. And I'm seeing so many of my Brazilian designer friends, moving here. A few other places as well. I think even London was a hot thing in the past, but now it's a bit harder.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I think something that's really interesting is the different design cultures there are from, coming from a place like Brazil and then coming over to Berlin. I've seen a lot of the hiring managers that I deal with see a lot of differences from just standard sort of design processes and things that are in the design process from people that are coming from Brazil. It's very different to how I think people are taught in Germany to, as a designer or doing design courses. The way that things are done are very different over there. And they a lot of it's massively beneficial and actually a lot better than it is taught in Germany. So I've seen a lot of talent. Hiring managers specifically have told me, the Brazilian market is a great place to look for designers, and a lot of them are open to coming over now, which is great. As you mentioned, Berlin is such a hot market for design right now, and it's crazy for sure. And of course, we'll delve a little bit deeper into that within the topic. So obviously the first the two topics we wanted to discuss were being a hiring manager during a hypergrowth phase, which you have had relevant experience of recent in that phase as well, and also why the design market is so competitive right now. But we'll jump straight into the first topic. So hypergrowth phases. We've seen a lot of businesses in Berlin specifically of recent go through these types of phases. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more in depth about, first and foremost, how did you find it overall, as an overall experience, being a hiring manager during that hypergrowth phase?
I think it's definitely a unique opportunity for any designer to grow very fast. So the thing I used to say is that I've had a lot of opportunity to see people getting hired, and companies growing, but just on the background, just like working as an individual contributor, and seeing the way people are assessing skills and stuff like that. So because I've worked as an individual contributor for so long, I think it's easier for me, and I think in my case it was easier to just understand what would be compelling to a designer to hear. Not that I'm telling any lies, but just the way you frame things, the way you show the company is uh, operating, the way the design team is set up, and the way the challenges are, and opportunities are available to them. I think it was a lot easier for me. But the skills of actually hiring and actually creating a hiring plan, working with talent acquisition managers and such, it was very tricky because I never did that before. So the first thing was like learning how to interview properly. So I did some quick courses on behavioral interviewing and some things like that, which is really important. I think I was mostly leaning towards like technical questions and trying to assess hard skills. But I knew for sure that the most important thing was like, to assess the soft skills, and this is really hard. I think you can take a stab at it. I think you can try to do a good job. Like it's never guaranteed, but there's a lot of techniques that you can apply to just try to eliminate some of the biggest concerns you might have when hiring someone. So yeah, just a quick background story on how this happened to me. Like I joined this company, HelloFresh, and I was the designer number 6. We actually had more people, but they left because the company was shifting to a very small company to a big one, and naturally you lose a few people.
Yeah.
And now we are about 60. So we've grown like 10x, which was insane. So at some point, mostly my full-time work was hiring, interviewing, screening CVs, and talking to talent acquisition managers all the time, trying to see what would be the best fit for individual specific positions we're opening. So yeah, it was a really challenging phase, but I loved it, and that's why I
Yeah.
think I fell in love with being a manager, because
Mm.
it starts from hiring for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think any type of hiring process is always tough, as you mentioned. Measuring, I think the common mistake is to focus too much on the hard skills. Can this person do it? Of course, it's a very important part, but I think Berlin specifically, a lot is built on culture, fit, and making sure people mold into the team and a good fits from a personality perspective, as much as possible. And it is very hard to test that, especially when
Yeah.
you're only interacting with them maybe for half an hour at a time or something like that. It's very difficult to get a gauge of that. But yeah, you said that it pretty much became a full-time job. The hiring process when you're going through such a growth phase, hiring that many designers. What were the most important things, I'd say, from a hard skill and soft skill perspective? What were the most important factors that you were looking for during that growth phase when you were interviewing people? What were the most important factors you were looking for there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think the first thing is to understand what the company wants, right? What the company is looking for.
Mm,
Uh, we are lucky enough to have a set of DNAs. We have a very strong culture, which was started when the company started. So it was really easy to explain how to apply that in our day to day. So I think that was something that was really powerful to use during that process. But the thing is mostly trying to understand from a skill set perspective. We are always having this debate on, should we find people who are like T-shaped professionals, should be like someone who is really proficient in one thing but can also apply and accomplish more things and do more of the design process, or should we just try to find more localized talents for
mm,
UI, for UX, or for research and stuff like that. So it
mm,
was always a debate, and we're still debating that. We are shifting a little bit, so we are always testing things around, because now we have enough people to just see specific skill sets and just shift those designers to work a little bit more towards those skill sets. But back then, because we didn't have enough people, you need people that can do everything, like end-to-end
mm,
process, from a little bit of research at the beginning, or working with a researcher, to like working with design system components, implementing that within our libraries, and handing over things to developers. So I would say this is the trickiest part for smaller companies. You definitely want to get someone with a very broad talent or skills. That's why I see, like, especially for mid-sized to small companies, the trend is normally to hire at least a very experienced mid-level designer to senior designer and above. And what the problem I see on that is that we lose the opportunity to actually train people internally, which is really powerful. I always believed in that. I've had the chance uh, to develop myself in companies that they gave me opportunity, although I didn't have the experience. And this is why I've grown and I've learned so fast. And so yeah, I think the balance of having like some junior designers, some sort of mentorship structure in place so you can develop people internally. So those designers normally are the ones that are sticking with the product and with the company longer because they have more to gain from that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue in the market at the moment. The amount of mid-level senior product design positions that I see in comparison to entry-level or junior positions is crazy. I very rarely see a junior design role that's advertised, or people are looking for that type of thing. Because I think the common theme at the moment is that people just want someone who can hit the ground running. But I think it's so tough to find someone that can do that. Even the most seasoned people, or the best designers out there, if they're joining a new company with a new culture, new process, new product, there is going to be some form of vesting period where it's going to be 1, 2, 3 months of them just getting to know the product, the team, asking lots of questions, understanding things. So that I don't think there is very rarely a case, unless probably someone who's worked there before, who's left and then joined again. I don't think someone's going to be able to come in and be like, yeah, I've cracked it. I can just get working straight away and just be the amazing designer that I know I am. I think there's always going to be a certain wearing in period. I think the investment into young talent who are coming out of the courses or university is lacking massively across the board now. I think people are so focused on hiring seniors, hiring mid-levels, because yes, you will get quicker success, but we'll go on to talk about it a little bit later. The retention rate of mid-levels to seniors is pretty poor at the moment, because there's so much competition out there, so many opportunities out there that people just getting swayed left, right, and center by new things. But going back to the hypergrowth phase point, what problems did you incur or face during these hypergrowth phases?
I think the classic one is finding good talent and getting a healthy pipeline of people applying, and then going through the screening process and all the other steps of interviewing. So I think we tweaked and we changed so much the interview process and even the amount of interviews. So we started with I think it was 6 interviews in total, including a design challenge or design take home assessment. And we reduced, I think right now we are in about 4 to 5, depends on the seniority of the position. So that was always tricky to first of all have enough people in that pipeline so we can have those interviews happening and get the people that you need on a timely manner, which is really hard. That's one. And I think the other thing is when I touched the design challenge thing. It might seem trivial, but that's a really big discussion industry wide.
Yeah.
How do you assess talent? How do you assess the ability of someone to deliver the craft and to deliver the work? Especially nowadays, I think in my days, like I'm a fairly old guy in the industry. We didn't have at all like boot camps, and you were either like self-taught or we didn't even have that many resources. Like online, you could find a few things, but it was very basic, right? So you either go into like information architecture, a little bit of UI. UX was a thing that was just coming up.
Concept, really, wasn't it?
It was just a concept, so it's a combination of things. But nowadays you have like those boot camps. You just join, you have the full thing. They will teach you the whole thing, and plus they will teach you how to get a job. So sometimes I think it's a great thing. I'm not saying it's not. The only thing is that sometimes it's really hard to assess because if you see the end projects for those boot camps, they are fairly similar in terms of process and quality and steps and everything else. So the question at the end is like, is this person capable of delivering this thinking in a real life situation with different types of pressures? I have stakeholders to account for. You have different challenges regarding timeline. You have to deliver something. So I think a combination of those things, it's a very tricky thing to assess. So I think all in all, you need to understand really deeply what you need. So what I'm seeing right now is companies that are investing on, if they're starting a design team from scratch, they would invest on very senior, like a small, very senior team, so they're able to deliver very quickly. So the ramp up time is very, very small. And then as soon as you have that, the ball rolling, and then you start getting more mid-level to junior designers. I think that's a really good, approach. For us, it was mostly trying to find. I think mid-levels were like the biggest amount of skill set people that we got for a long time. I think for 1 or 2 years we invested heavily on that, because we understood that mid-levels could grow into senior designers fairly easily, and then they had enough understanding from their previous jobs to just deliver the work really quickly.
Yeah. I know you touched upon boot camps and things there. I completely agree. I think the courses are great. I think they give people an opportunity to learn very quickly, what a design process looks like and what needs to be included in there. But I do also agree, and I think I've spoken to hiring managers recently about this, is that a lot of their portfolio work, if it was recent, is going to look very, very similar, because a lot of them have done the same courses or done the same projects, worked on the same projects, and it's not, as you said, it's not time pressured. It's not budget pressured potentially. It's not necessarily a real life scenario where there are deliverables that have to be focused on and done in certain amounts of time. And they do suffer from that, because, as I said, the amount of junior positions or entry level positions is minimal right now. I think what I've also seen a little bit of a trend of is that some more junior designers join startups or early stage companies that are really early stage, but they join as the only designer there. The company wants a designer that can come in and help them grow or get them where they need to be, or potentially build early stage design systems or basic design processes to get them where they need to be. But I speak to so many of them, and a lot of the time it's I've taken on lots of responsibility, I've enjoyed it, I'm pretty much responsible for everything designed there, but they haven't had the chance to learn the full trade yet. They're still very early on, beginners in their trade, and they haven't had a chance to bounce off seniors or be around more senior people to learn from and really understand what needs to happen. So they end up working there for maybe 1 or 2 years, and then their next position is very difficult to get, because they don't necessarily have the full
the team
skills.
experience.
The team experience. Whereas, but then you've got, as I said, you've got the other part where there's not too many junior positions open for them to gain that experience. So I think juniors are really suffering at the moment to really try and find a good position where they're going to be able to progress in their career and be invested in, let's say. What advice would you give to juniors or people who are doing boot camps at the moment in terms of what they should do after the boot camps are finished, and where to go from there?
This is a tough question. I think there's a few things that I might mention. I think during those courses, especially if sometimes you're switching from a different discipline you're coming from. I don't know. I've seen like people coming from psychology, from anything you can imagine, like to design, because they have had contact with design in some way, and they understood that it was a really nice thing to do, which is always the best reason to start working as a designer. Normally our people are very passionate about, when they find out exactly what design is and what product design can do for products. It's something that takes you like very strongly. So I would say, like, first thing is, I think the boot camps and some of those quicker courses, they would try to come up with a way of teaching you the whole spectrum of things you need to learn. And it's a lot. So you at some point need to define exactly which direction you would like to focus a little bit more. So the advice I could give is, like, from a real life perspective, working on a company, at least personally, the way I assess designers is mostly about teamwork, collaboration. I think there's a lot about the way you communicate yourself with people above you, below you, and in the same level as you. There's a lot of small, like, soft skills that you need to develop that you definitely can use the opportunity of a bootcamp to learn. Why? Because you have mentors, you have people with experience in the industry, and I think sometimes people get very hooked into the hard skills and the UI stuff. I think learning Figma, learning tools, I think it's very charming, something you really sometimes get trapped just on that. I like to believe that hard skills you can learn fairly easily. Learning tools is not that hard. You can learn on the job for sure, but the soft skills, like working with the team, and especially like learning stuff like Scrum or Agile techniques, and
Mm.
how do companies apply those things into their teams. Normally, tech companies, they have the same structure, right? So they
Yeah,
normally work
sure.
with cross-functional teams. You're going to be
Yeah.
working with engineers, you're going to be working with product owners, product managers, quality assurance engineers, and so on. So how does it work? You can find resources online explaining how the
Mm.
dynamics of a team happens and the way it works. So I think if you nail that, if you understand even on a conceptual level how tech teams and how engineering teams, how product teams operate, I think it's a very really good. You can up your game when you're applying to jobs, even if you don't have the experience. Showing that you are knowledgeable about the importance of the designer as a glue that would put all those pieces together when you are delivering a feature or product. That's the most important thing. So understanding the
Mm.
bigger picture, and then you can go on the details, like how to
Yeah.
craft products, which is
Mm.
I'm fairly simplifying that, but it's easier
Yeah,
than
yeah, sure.
the soft skills. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting point of view. I think the focus on hard skills, as you mentioned, can be too much of a focus for junior designers or people going through those boot camps, because yes, they are the hard skills that you need to become a designer. But I think design is one of the most collaborative positions that you have at a tech company, because you do collaborate with lots of
Yeah.
different industries, lots of different stakeholders, your team members, other team members from engineering teams and marketing and things like that. So yeah, I think having a better focus on the soft skills and trying to explore resources online and potentially look into courses from Scrum and Agile methodologies and things like that is a great place to start. Okay, cool. Now going a bit more back towards the hypergrowth phases. Now we talked a little bit more about the problems that you face. Obviously, trying to find the talent, having a good level of pipeline coming through, understanding and assessing why these people could be good fits for you. On the flip side, what were the successes that you had?
Successes. Yeah, I think it's a lot. And just the fact that I'm getting to know so many
Mm.
great people, so many talented people. I've got to talk to them every day, which was amazing. You have different backgrounds, different expectations, different
Mm.
experiences. So I am completely. I'm a person that likes to conduct interviews as a conversation like we're having now. Anything that would be super strict, super formal, anything that would cause some sort of tension
Mm.
to the process. I'm not into that, because what you're trying to find is mostly like how that person is in their real life, and it's really hard to do it, especially with this just virtual
Mm.
environment we're going through
Yeah,
now.
sure.
So I like to have a very open conversation. I try to be as open as possible about the challenges we have, about the problems and the good things we
Mm.
have. So I think that the best things that happened to me was like definitely the people that I managed to hire. Going through the entire process and seeing that person
Mm.
receiving an offer, seeing someone moving from a different country to Berlin to Germany, and starting off with the company. I've seen some people doing that and growing, and now they're design leads. So it's really, really rewarding. I think it's a process that I think that back to the discussion of hiring juniors. I think if you're looking in the short term, it's always it doesn't pay off, right? Because you have someone with not enough experience, so you have to invest. As you said, it's
Yeah,
investment. You're
sure.
investing a lot of
Mm.
time. But having someone, if you see the potential, if you understand that a person can be a good designer, investing on that person and seeing that person grow and just thriving and becoming
Mm.
someone that would influence positively the company and
Sure.
other designers, I can tell you, like it pays off. It takes a
Mm.
while. So I would say it takes 2-3 years so you to
Mm.
understand how this whole thing would work.
Yeah.
But it pays off. It pays off. So if, of
Yeah.
course, if you're on a budget, if you need to get the product up and running really quickly, it's a different discussion.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I would say it's design is not as pragmatic and not as easy to measure as engineering. We don't work with a task-based system mostly.
Yeah.
It's a combination of a lot of subtle things that needs to come in place together in a nice way, and depending on the pressure of the delivering stuff and the company context, that might be really tricky. So yeah, it's a subtle game. So I think I've learned a lot through this process. So that was another good thing for me
Yeah.
personally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, the key success was growing that team, or seeing a team of six, you being the sixth member, grow to 60 people. It's
Yeah.
a huge increase. And as you said, you get to meet a lot of new people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and really get to understand them as designers and people as well. What What do you think you would have changed, looking back at yourself or looking back at the hypergrowth phase that you went through from today's date? What do you think are a few things that you would have changed throughout that process to maybe make it better or more efficient, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm always thinking about that. I think having so just a little bit of context as well. Sometimes in a company where when you are, even if you're a people manager, you're working with you have some reports and you are part of the recruiting process. Especially when the company is growing, you are not responsible for all the steps. You're not responsible for
Mm,
dictating like how many interviews you're going to have and how the
mm,
process would come up. Um, but definitely, if you can, I think the thing that I would change is getting more involved, because when I started hiring, I did have a lot of opening because we didn't even have like a design director or anything. I was just
yeah,
reporting to the CTO back then, so I did had a lot of opportunities to say what I wanted to see happening. So I think working very closely and having a really good relationship with the talent acquisition managers, I think they're amazing people, like as yourself, like recruiters, like how to assess specific things on people, like try to learn how to ask the right questions, try to learn how to really properly go through the process. So I've had really good discussions. I've worked with like 5, 6, maybe almost 10 TAs in the past, and
mm,
I've learned so much on techniques and how to improve the design process, how to improve the design hiring process. We have removed some steps. We tested out a lot of things, like being very open to testing and getting the opinions from people that got rejected for some reason. Trying to get, because if you do the process
yeah,
nicely, people will be very open to say like, I think this part of the process didn't feel well. So I'm happy to say, because I remember on Glassdoor I was checking back then, I don't know now, but we had a very positive review on people who didn't get an offer, because they
yeah,
said like the process was very human. So I think definitely I would keep like that. I think
yeah,
rushing is bad, unless you need to rush. Like, don't
mm,
rush with the process, because
yeah,
you will find the right people and that would pay off.
mm,
Right now we have a lot of opportunities to just fill in the gaps of not having designers. We can get top talent stuff. We can get some designers, freelancers. There's a lot of really talented people, very, very expensive, but for a while until you find the right person, I think
yeah.
it's something you can do. Yeah, so those are a few things I can
Yeah,
think
for
of.
sure. I completely agree with you on the maintaining a good reputation, even if people are getting rejected for certain reasons. I think there are too many companies out there that, especially ones that are going through massive growth phases, that think, oh, we're so busy, we don't have time to reject people. Can you reject them on our behalves and stuff like that? I think, look, as an external recruiter, I'm always going to speak to people, have those difficult conversations about rejections and things like that. But sometimes I don't get any feedback. I don't get any feedback as to why this person's been rejected, or all they send is just an email saying, sorry, we've decided not to go forward with your application, or something like that. That doesn't help anyone at all, especially if you're working with external party here, because
Yeah.
if a company's rejecting someone and you don't provide us any feedback as to why they are, or the candidate any feedback as to why they're being rejected, we don't know what to do with the next candidate. We don't know why,
I
why
mean,
this
how
person's
can you
being
how can you
rejected.
improve the process if you don't have
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
the
Yeah. And I
feedback? Yeah.
think I think asking the candidates for their feedback is just as important as providing them feedback as well, because you want to understand how your process is, why, if you're not hiring people, for some reason, let's say you did analysis of when people were dropping out, it was the fourth stage, it was the design
Yeah.
task stage, or it was the hiring manager stage, or something like that. If you don't
Hmm.
ask for feedback, or you don't do own reviews on your own hiring process, you will never learn the reasons why people aren't joining you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be a specific person. You might realize that there's a common trend, they're speaking to this person at this point, and then a lot of people are dropping out after that point. Well, let's assess how they interview people. What's the common theme here? If you don't ask for the candidate's feedback at that point, no one will understand, well, he's asking me the same questions that I'm getting asked in other interview stages already, or something like that. It's I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think the more stages you have as well, the more risk you have of repetition there, because a lot of the time, between maybe cross-functional hiring manager or something like that, the questions are commonly going to be the same, and it's about the sharing of information between
Yeah.
between different parties and hiring managers there as well.
Yeah, and also this is something I've seen a lot. Like, and when I mentioned that you don't have full control of the
Mm,
steps, you don't even
yeah.
know sometimes who is going to be interviewing in these other steps, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, in smaller companies, you don't have enough trained people to go through that
Mm,
process. And I've seen that so many times, especially with design. You would have someone with no experience in interviewing,
mm,
just conducting some like a fairly important interview. Let's say an engineer conducting an interview about team collaboration or something like that.
mm,
And sometimes it can feel very awkward. You can even draw the candidate back on their decision of joining the company just because they had one bad interview.
Yeah.
So I think companies should definitely offer some sort of support on whoever is part of the interviewing process. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of training, coaching, and
Sure.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think getting people to understand the importance of, interviewing in general and finding talent, it's not a trivial thing, as you know, like it's your
Yeah.
job, so it's
Yeah.
something you need some time to build that knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of a lot of industry leaders, just generally across business and tech and things like that, a lot of the time their main focus is, the reason why their companies are so successful is because either them or the people they've employed are the best at finding the best people for them.
Yeah.
And everyone is trained specifically to understand what they're looking for, the culture that they're trying to create, and they don't accept anything different. And a lot of the best companies out there are the ones who can attract the best people for their specific business. And I think,
and we shouldn't be fooled that if you have a nice a very nice and attractive product, that will be enough to retain talent. It's not the case.
No.
People are attached to other people. They're attached to nice,
Yeah.
well-structured teams that people care about each other. So it feels very optimistic and very, fluffy. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, this is what would retain designers. I've had designers like with much better opportunities, dropping them off just to stay with the company or join this company. Even when it was that big, the salary was not that good compared to others. But when you find a place where you feel like, okay, this is comfortable to me, I can grow, I can learn here. This is what makes them to make a decision, and this is what gets them to stay. Ultimately, that's what I learned as well.
Yeah, sure. I think everyone knows salary is an important part of a job, but most people I've worked with, design wise specifically, are much more focused on the growth opportunity, the company, the people they're going to be working with. They'll actually accept less salary. They'll sacrifice their salary because of those things, as opposed to getting a higher salary with somewhere they're a bit unsure of. Now, last question or last bit about the hyper growth phase that I wanted to cover off, Guilherme, was, I think a lot of the time I've seen, as you mentioned something back, you said don't rush. Don't rush into it. Don't rush, because you will find the right people eventually. You have to sacrifice time sometimes just to try and find the right people. Do you feel that quality sometimes was sacrificed because of time pressure or budget pressure, or delivery pressure, to hire people?
Yes, it was. And it's like it's crazy to think that sometimes you were just tempted to just make a quick decision. I think especially when the process is not that clear in terms of how you're assessing the soft skills and how you're doing the behavioral questions in the entire process, it's really, really easy to fall into a bias direction when you have a certain person that is ultimately responsible for making the decision of hiring that person or not. So let's say you do have the interviews with several people. You have design leads, you have designers, engineers, and maybe some executive person within the company to interview at the end. It's important to understand, like, how are we making the decision at the end? Like, is this a combination? Are we having this meeting at the end where everyone can disclose like what they thought about the candidate, like pros and cons, and then you can make an informed decision? And I've seen that step being skipped a few times. Like, there's no like that you just interview someone, you don't know what happens next, and you're just waiting for it to see. Like, sometimes we do have the scorecards we have to fill in within our system. Most companies do have those. Sometimes your assessment is a no, like it's not a good fit for several reasons. You do write all this stuff in there, and then at the end you see the person joining the company anyways, and then you try to get the information. So this is very common because the company is growing so much, you have more people involved, and the pressure of getting more and more designers. That's what lands us on this situation. And I did see like problems that we found with certain designers, like behavioral problems, or just plainly like people not being a good fit to the way we do things. Think about this, cultural fit, which is not the best term. I think most companies use that in the wrong way. But hiring people that were clearly not a good fit happened a few times, and I can tell like the exit rate for those are a lot higher, and it costs a lot more to the company. Especially in Germany, it's really hard to just not work with someone anymore. You have to have very strong reasons. There's a full process for that. So yeah, I've seen that. It's normal. I think as you are growing, you need to grow your team from X to 10X.
Mm,
It's almost impossible. That's not gonna happen.
mm,
But it's a one-to-one relationship. Like the quicker you go, the sometimes you're lucky, but the quicker you go, the amount of steps you're reducing. If you're reducing the conversation, just making snappy decisions about something, it tends to not go well. That's a
mm.
very easy equation.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I've seen.
yeah. I think it's a really difficult thing to balance out because I'm a big believer that if you really want someone, you need to try and get them through that interview process as quickly as possible because as we said at the start, the market is so competitive right now. However, I also understand that trying to assess quality and culture fit and everything for them, if you rush them through the process or speak to them very quickly and don't really get a gist of how well they actually fit, you
Yeah.
do run the risk of it not working out and then being in the same position, having to hire again the next 2, 3, 6 months, let's say. One last question on this topic, Guilherme. Something that you brought up there was interview process and rushing and things like that.
Mhm.
During a hyper growth phase, what do you think the best interview process looks like?
Mm. I can tell like maybe the best that we have gotten so far. Yeah. So first of all, I think a nice screening process from our talent acquisition managers. I think
Hmm.
um, there needs to be a fairly good understanding from that person on what we're looking for.
Hmm.
Because if you have a funnel with a lot of people who are clearly not good fits, you would waste a lot of time going through
Yeah,
CVs, which is a pain in the ass sometimes.
sure.
So I think a nice screening process, and then I would say like you do need a designer talking to that person right away as soon as you can, because a designer can tell when another designer is a good fit or
Mm,
not, especially if they're working for the company for a while, and then they can tell like, okay, I think this might be a good fit because of the reasons that I know of myself.
sure.
So the best experience I've had with our process is not the process we have right now. It's the hardest one to get. So the first interview was a TA plus a designer on the same interview. Why is that good? I think first of all, you train designers just by shadowing someone with a lot of experience on interviewing.
Mm,
You do get a very like first-hand opinion from a designer on how that person went on this first interview. Normally, it's just 30 minutes or 40 minutes just to see like general like cultural
hmm.
fits things and
Yeah,
skill set type of questions. So it's fairly easy for a designer to learn how to ask some of those questions and take part of those interviews. I've seen like it speeds up the process quite fairly good, because fairly well, because if you increase the quality on the top of the funnel, I think it gets a lot of the next steps a lot easier, if that makes sense. So after doing that, you would have a design challenge or some way to assess their portfolio. So you can
sure.
do a portfolio assessment, just talk through some of your experience on one project you
Mm,
have on your portfolio or something like that. We did have and we still have a home test. So we send over the home test if you see that person has good opportunity, good potential. Sorry. And once you receive back, you would have an interview with one very experienced designer, most likely a design lead, and another designer which might not be that experienced. So that's another opportunity for you to train. And what I'm
sure.
telling you, this is a best process, is because you are also mentoring other designers to learn how the process of interviewing
Mm,
works.
yeah,
So you would have two people interviewing during technical interview. They would go through the process of checking the home test and crafting some questions, assessing those questions with the hiring manager to
mm,
see if they're correct. And then once you finalize that, I would say that this is just one more interview needed. I would say we had at some point we had two. We had executive interview, which was even it could be like a product manager or a sometimes even a C-level person from the company interviewing, just to give a general,
yeah,
you know, broader understanding of the company culture to that person, and also getting
yeah.
some of that back. Um, but if you do have a very senior designer manager, designer director, or VP of design or something like that, you could have that person doing that
Mm,
interview. I think it's also always important to have someone from either engineering or product management to conduct interviews. But I would be very careful if they're trained, if they're seasoned to do that well enough. But I think that's definitely a good thing. So yeah, I think the last step you could go with either with
yeah,
someone very experienced from products, and then you just make a decision, or you
mm,
can have someone
yeah.
from senior management or a design senior management as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah, I think you're the second person now who's been on the podcast. The last person I had, Shashi, he also mentioned the fact that, and I completely agree. I think it's such a great thing to do by mixing the TA first call with a designer or a hiring manager of some sort, because you avoid wasting so much time with not necessarily a TA. It sounds like the talent partners you had were great and you worked really well with them. But some of the time, or a lot of the time, the talent partners aren't necessarily the specialists in that specific area. They're hired as a talent specialist across the whole board, so they don't really specialize in one specific area. Now, if you can have specialists, it's great, because obviously you have their perspective of their specialism of recruiting and understanding them and asking the right questions during that interview. But then you also have the design perspective of do is this person actually going to be good enough? And I think it saves so much time and effort, money, investment into the interview process if you can have those two stages merged. I loved the point that you made about having that step with the more senior person than they are and a more junior person there, because one thing you mentioned was really important about juniors coming into the world of design is that it's how you collaborate with all levels of people, so people on the same level as you, above you, and below you. And I think if you merge that with the case presentation, as you mentioned, it's amazing, because they can talk through and the junior can understand how they work, and the junior can actually learn from that process. But the more senior person understands, is this person going to be good enough? What level are they currently at in comparison to the existing team, and things like that, which is amazing. One last question I wanted to ask you, Guilherme, was something you mentioned about the take-home task or case study presentation or portfolio presentation. What do you think is the best part or best task presentation, that particular step of assessing this person's skills? What do you think is the best way to assess?
Yeah, I think that is the $1 million questions question,
Yeah.
because this is something that is debated it's so intensely on
Yeah.
the web, because it's there's no one best answer, I would say.
Yeah.
From my experience at HelloFresh, I still believe that having a specific assessment that is making the candidate to work on something for this particular process is more beneficial than just going through a pre-existing case study that they have
Yeah.
put together. The reason for that is, especially if you're working with very experienced designers, if you have a senior designer in the process, it's very easy to put something together that looks very good, that tells a very good story, that looks even too good to be true. Sometimes I've seen that you have like such a concise process, all the
Yeah.
steps being followed perfectly. You have data collection, you have data analysis, and then you have iterations, and then you have this feature being released to people, which is always what we're looking for. But it's really tricky sometimes to find, okay, so is this really the way it happened? Like, what is the role you played on this thing?
Yeah.
And so it's always tricky. So getting someone to expose themselves and do something either live with you or creating something, I don't think it should be anything big. I don't think it should be something about, I think it should not be something that it is clearly like a feature for your own product. I think that's not cool.
Yeah.
I think if you can, you should pay them for the time they're spending doing
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah, that's what I
definitely a
was
good
gonna say.
practice. But just try and find it. So what are the types of problems you face within your product development process? And try to translate that into something completely different. Try to think of,
Yeah.
okay, what if you had like this type of problem with a product that is completely different from yours? How would you tackle this? Show me the process. You don't have to finalize anything. I just want to show you some rough wireframes, because you can assess UI skills very easily. So if you go through their portfolio, you see like, I think there's some nice UI here. So we're looking for a process, we're looking for collaboration, we're looking for what would be the touch points that you would have here with stakeholders, with product analysts and data folks and data scientists as well. So how would you do this in real life? I need to understand that. I would say though, like for more junior candidates with not a lot of experience previously to the company, I think you can go a lot easier on that. You can just have maybe you can design a whiteboard session. You can just go through some, trying to come up with some real life situations. There's even this book called Product Design. I think it's Product Design Exercises or something. It's mostly talking about how to solve whiteboarding exercises that companies normally apply. I think that's a really powerful tool to see how someone would behave within a real life environment. The tricky thing with whiteboard sessions is that if you're not comfortable just exposing yourself live in front of someone and just trying to solve a problem like that, it might be very intimidating. And if you have someone who is a bit shy, you are taking them away from the opportunity of just
Yeah.
in real life they might be a bit quieter, but they can do the
Mm.
job. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you have to be. So it would favor more loud people and people who are more
Yeah.
extroverts. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with all the points you've made there, Glenn. I think flexibility is one thing that needs to be there in an interview process. You need to base
Yeah.
it off the person that you're interviewing because, as you said, just because someone's a bit more shy, it doesn't mean that they can't be a great designer or they couldn't be a great addition to the team.
Yeah,
You might
for
just
sure.
have to adjust it. One thing, and the reason why I was laughing was that you spoke about portfolios and being able to tell whether they're good enough. It looks like a perfect picture or yeah, it's just a perfect process that they follow during these particular projects. And so I made a video recently that I'm going to publish on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn. It's more about CV and portfolio advice. And something that I mentioned during the portfolio advice was to say, basically, don't paint the perfect picture in your portfolio because
No, and this is
because yeah,
people are looking at your looking at how you adjust to bad situations. That's the
yeah,
most powerful thing. So
yeah,
you should have a section on your portfolio or on your case study called "fuck ups" or something like that,
yeah,
where you're just
yeah,
sharing the stuff that did
yeah,
completely wrong.
yeah,
And if the end of the story is like the feature was never released because
yeah,
we screwed up for some reason,
yeah.
that's not a problem at all. Like if you can tell
No,
the story
yeah,
why, and if you can
yeah,
tell the story what you did after that, that's
yeah,
what we want to hear. So it's not
yeah.
about a perfect story.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the exact point I made. It was just you need to include the things you tried and didn't work out. What you learned from that process, where you went next. Because
Yeah,
as yourself, as a hiring manager, you're trying to understand in as much depth as possible about this particular person, how they work, what their thought process is, how they deal with problems, how they deal with things that didn't work out. I think especially in
yeah,
management level as well. If a manager's interviewing for a particular position,
yeah,
a lot of the time you are judged on how you deal with things that don't go right. Obviously
yes,
everyone wants to be the best manager out there, but it's about, okay, this didn't work well, this didn't go right, or I made the wrong decision here. How did you express that to the team? How did you deal with
yeah.
that? What did you actually do?
And
Yeah,
as a tip for candidates, I think mostly, especially not so experienced candidates, I would say look for companies that would appreciate your vulnerability. So if you can show,
mm,
because for me, like this is the most important skill that
yeah,
someone can have, like showing vulnerability and showing that I'm not telling you I know everything. I'm actually telling you that I don't know a bunch of stuff.
mm,
And if you're interviewing and you see that the company doesn't respect that, or they're shifting into something like, oh, but you should know that, right?
yeah,
Of course, with a few things you should know, because it
yeah,
should be on top of, it should be
yeah.
exactly
The
on your
basics
level
of your
of
role. Yeah,
what you're applying, right?
yeah,
But in a way, I think if you show that you don't nail everything, you're there to learn as well. You can bring a little bit of your knowledge, but you're also taking something to improve yourself and bring back after a while. So yeah, if you find companies that can appreciate that, that's the best type of place to work, for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
Sure. Cool. Now, the next sort of bigger topic that we wanted to cover was why the design market is so competitive right now. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the conversations we've had in that hypergrowth phase or discussions were definitely relevant to this point as well. First question is just why? Why do you think the design market is so competitive right now?
I think it's a combination of factors, which is good for designers. I think I've
Yeah.
never seen so many open positions, and I've never seen so many designers just finding good jobs and finding really sweet opportunities to
Mm.
join. So I would say it's a combination of factors. Like the competition is huge right now. So if you think about any type of industry within tech, I'm talking mostly
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
tech. Fintechs, if you think about health, it's exploding right now. Food is the industry I'm at right now. It's
Mm.
really massive. Um, there's a huge problem with retention, customer retention. Why? Because there's a lot of competition. So if you have a lot of products doing the same thing or similar things,
Mm.
getting people to stick with your product is really hard. So back then, I think engineering was the biggest gap, because you needed to
Yeah.
make sure that things are up and running. If you have stability, you have security, you have a bunch of those things in place. User experience wasn't much of a problem. Like you can retain because you don't have that many competitors. Your product is
Sure.
fairly
Yeah.
okay. But now things are different. I think companies are trying to exhaust their capabilities on marketing, so trying to increase the funnel size. So we have a lot of people coming in, but it's leaking too much. The churn rate is massive in most products. If you think about SaaS products or
Mm.
e-commerce as well. So the only way to solve that is by having a thorough product development process with really consistent application of user-centered techniques. which is normally coming from designers and also product owners who are really knowledgeable about, design as well. I would say they need to be very aware of design. All those things at the beginning, as I said, it was just a thing. Like UX, it wasn't proper. There was no proper definition for UX and now product design, which is even weirder to explain sometimes. But it's easy to understand the value now than it was before. So if you do have a product with a nice user experience, people will stay. That's as easy as it. So a product you can think of, if you, I don't know, I think in the UK you do have Volt, right? You have Volt there, the food delivery service.
We have many similar things. I don't know if I'll
or Deliveroo. Deliveroo, I think
Deliveroo.
Deliveroo is also provides a really massive, really good user experience versus other products that are fairly worse than that. So just purely by having those small, nice, enjoyable moments and delightful moments within the journey, it's enough for you to retain and to increase the uptake, or even like getting cross-selling, upselling happening. So it all depends on design, and I think now companies realize that. So that's why people are just hiring like crazy. They want to have design teams. They want to have I want to have a good user experience within my products. And I think investors are asking for that, because if you have big rounds of investment, people are just tossing money at your business. I think investors are more than aware that if you don't provide a good user experience, your product might not pan out, even if it's a really good idea or concept in the first place. So I think that's a common knowledge. That's why I think there's so many buzz around design, and I think that's never gonna go away.
I completely agree. I think the value, just the general value of design now is so much greater and so much more accepted across the tech market than it once was. I think everyone's seeing it across, as you mentioned, every different industry right now. The best companies or the best products that are out there are the ones that have the biggest focus on creating that amazing user experience for their user base. But yeah, I can see different trends as to why it's so competitive as well. I think obviously the fact that there are so many opportunities out there right now, I also think that the salaries are a massive part of that now as well.
It's improving. It's improving. Yeah, for sure.
I think, when I started in product design recruitment, I saw I'd probably say on average, maybe like a 10 to 15,000 euro difference between engineers. So I worked in engineering recruitment before, and I had a good understanding of what the typical engineering salaries were like. And when I went into product design recruitment, I did see a little bit of a gap, but I feel like that gap has definitely got a lot smaller, even potentially the same as engineers now in certain cases, and companies that designers are being valued as equally from a salary perspective as they are. Why do you think? I know you said retention was a big problem, but why do you think designers, I'd say more, not necessarily management level, I'd say more from senior down to junior, why do you think designers don't stay at businesses for too long? I think, average tenure wise, you probably look at maybe a year to 2 years as the average sort of time a designer would stay at a company. But why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of reasons. Probably I can touch a few of them, like my assumptions. I think the combination of, I think designers need meaning more than other disciplines, and meaning is a very broad word. It's just like a combination of a vision for what you're doing. Like if I believe in the product I'm working on, I think it's important for designers to believe in what they're working on. Having people that I trust, having a team culture that is making me safe, and then making me like show what I can, the best I can, and give my best work to the company. I think career opportunities. So if you do have a fairly good career progression framework, even if it's very early stages, you need to have something. Because I've seen designers, like especially very small companies, they're just there. Even they join as a senior designer, even not being that, but they just give you a title just because it's easier to get you hired. And then you're stuck, right? Because you're a senior already, but you don't have all the capabilities, all the skills to be a senior compared to a large company. So you're stuck. So having sort of career progression is also important. And I think those factors are the most important ones. And there's I mentioned that people are hiring like crazy. Everyone wants to have a nice design team, but not all companies understand what a design team is actually doing, or they should do, and what they can do.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest question that designers should be asking, like, how do you see the importance of design within your company?
Yeah.
How do you see design bringing value and money to the business, and not only being a thing that
Mm.
it's just adding a
Yeah.
little bit of delight to the product?
Mm.
So if designers are not seeing that the company understands, they know that they will be trapped in some points
Yeah.
where I would have to either like super educate people all the time, like this is what I do, this is the importance
Mm.
of what I do, and it can be really exhausting. Like when you're working on a company that doesn't understand exactly what you're supposed to do, and you're hearing sometimes even a little bit of prejudice against what you are supposed to be
Mm.
delivering,
Yeah.
it causes a lot of stress, and it's just like, you know what, I just want to go somewhere that would
Mm.
understand me better, right? So that's why I think good design leadership is really important. Even if you don't have a designer to manage your designers, you need
Mm.
to have someone who is really open to, okay, I want to understand what can you
Yeah.
do, and what is the potential of design for our company, and let's do it together.
Mm.
I think those small things, those subtle conversations, and giving them a prospect of, okay, so we understand this now, let's just try to make it work, and let's try to improve and grow the team, and
Mm.
there's definitely a path for you to just stay with here,
Yeah.
stay with us, stay with the company. So yeah, the prospect of future, meaning, salary, and career,
Yeah.
outline, I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are certainly the main topics there. I think one thing you mentioned there that's very important, I get asked the question a lot, is, how much do the company value design? And I think it's a very tough question for me in my position to answer, because in honesty, I don't know. I don't know the real ins and outs of
Yeah.
all I can relay is information that I've been told. But the reality of it is only ever really discovered during interview process and things like that. And I explain that to everyone that I work with. This is what I understand about the business. This is their current design team, the culture that they try and create, how long people typically stay in the role there, and things like that. If people have left, I
Mhm.
try to understand what the reasoning is behind that, what their current design mentality is, the maturity of their design team at the moment, the problems that they face. But in reality, as I said, I can't really judge
Mhm.
on how much they value it. It comes a lot from the top, to be honest. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I think the best companies out there that provide the best opportunities for designers are the ones that have a design minded or a high level design director, or someone that sits on
Mhm.
the board of directors or something like that. The higher up someone with a design mentality who comes from a design background there is at a company, usually what I've
Yeah.
seen has created a very safe space or exciting space for their design team to work in. But as you said, some companies want to build design teams but don't have anyone there existing who knows how to do that,
Yeah.
or effectively how to do that, which can
And I
cause
think,
issues.
to be honest, I think, well, back to the discussion of the hiring process, I think we put a lot of effort on trying to understand if that candidate would be a good fit for the company
Mm,
on that moment of time. And we have the opportunity then to understand what they want for themselves, right? So what are you looking
mm,
for?
mm.
Different seniorities, they would be looking for different things.
Yeah.
And what I think that most companies do is that they lose that information, that piece of information, as soon as you hire.
Mm.
Okay, so let's start from scratch,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes you don't engage on that conversation again. So
Mm.
you should have like a record of, okay, so this is what we discussed when we hired
Yeah.
you, like these are the points that you would like to improve, these are the weak points or the strong points you have on your skill set. So let's get the conversation starting from here, and let's make sure you are following a path where you feel like you're growing.
Mm.
And I might be very idealistic on what I'm going to say now, but you need to develop talent for, not for your own company, like you need to develop talent for the industry, because if they
Yeah.
feel like you're not crafting their own careers to solve just a company problem, and you're not thinking of them as human beings that
Yeah.
eventually will leave the company, like, so I'm not expecting people to stay for 10 years. Some people will,
Yeah.
but most of them are not, realistically. So if you show that you really care about them as, designers within an industry context, and if you leave this company tomorrow, you will land a really nice job, and acknowledge that, but I really want you to stay, so let's work together to get the best
Yeah.
value for you, but also to keep you providing the value to the come back to the company.
Mm.
So it's a very like even like naive, I think, approach, but understanding people very deeply, especially with design, is really important.
Mm. Mm.
Designers can be very sensitive. I'm very sensitive. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying like engineers are not, in other jobs
No,
are
yeah,
not, but
of
I'm just
course,
saying
yeah.
designers can be.
Mm.
It's a lot of things you need to learn to be a good designer, and there's a lot of subtlety within those things. So
Mm.
that's why we tend to be a little more sensitive around the
Yeah.
application of our craft too.
Yeah, well, I think I completely understand the point you make about sensitivity, because I think you guys are at the forefront of understanding the human interaction with your product. The
Yeah,
engineering parts, they're there to build the product. They build the fundamentals of the product and how it is used by your users. But essentially, you guys, if you're doing research, if you're conducting user interviews and things like that, you're at the forefront and having that human interaction of understanding why people want to use this product. And I think a lot of companies that I've dealt with or heard about is that they don't. Research is something that's coming into play a lot more. I think people are understanding the value of design as a whole, but also the effectiveness of
Mhm.
research. But I've spoken to a lot of designers recently that their companies don't really care too much about the research. They do a lot of things based off assumption or existing knowledge, or maybe just
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that the design team think should be done, right? Or something that I've heard a lot recently is, the competitor analysis that we do, they're doing this, so let's just do it.
yeah.
That's such a common
Yeah.
thing that happens across
Mhm.
product design. But competitor analysis, yes, I agree, it is an important thing, because you want to understand what people are doing better than you and how you can implement it. But the first point of call should always be your existing user base. Understand what they want from the product. If they Just because your competitor's doing something, if you speak to 20 20 different users at once and they all say, no, we think that this is the best place to go, then it's the logical decision to go with what your current user base actually wants, as
Yeah.
opposed to competitors doing it, let's just go do it.
I know, and any product management book would tell you like just listen to your customers and you'll be
Yeah.
good, everything will be fine. But in reality, it's really hard to just. You're not gonna find that throughout all the features you're working on. You're
Mm.
gonna have a lot of top-down decisions. You're gonna have a lot of assumption-based, decisions as well, which is okay. I think designers need to be able to navigate with that as well. So you cannot be too idealistic in terms of what you're gonna find on a product team.
Mm.
I think you need to be sure that that's not happening all the time across all the teams, because then your value will be essentially just copying something else or providing good UI, and that's something that definitely would make most designers feel like
Yeah.
unmotivated. And that's what I say about meaning. Meaning is essentially
Mm.
like how much value from the my experience on understanding customer pain points and translating that into like business,
Mm.
uh, combined with business requirements and providing good features and good products.
Yeah.
That's the meaning a designer is looking for. So yeah, basing yourself, like even if you hear companies on the interview process, like some people say we are data driven, we are
Mm.
research driven. It might be the case. I think they might be slightly informed by those things. But it's rare to find a company that would be purely like data driven, like we
Yeah.
only act on what we know,
Mm.
or purely research driven. We talk to
Yeah.
customers every day, and everything we do is based on what we learn from
Yeah.
them. But yeah, I think it's about the balance, and it's
Yeah.
hard to assess that during interviews. When you join a company, you know the reality. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can ask those questions if you have interviews with your future peers.
Mm.
Those are the people you should ask, like how do you see your
Yeah.
work being applied every day? So how
Yeah.
much problems you are discussing versus solutions.
Mm.
And that's an interesting thing to get
Yeah,
during
sure. I
interview.
think it's a completely separate topic in itself, really, isn't it? But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So back to like a bit more about the retention and why designers tend to leave. I'd say more frequently than in other industries potentially. I think design is getting a bit like engineering now, where there is so many opportunities and things like,
Yeah.
and they want to leave. Now, something I've heard recently is that not too much, but something that I've seen to try and retain people a bit longer or give them more incentive to stay a bit longer is something like a
Mhm.
loyalty bonus or something like that. So for people that don't know what one would look like or what one is, you stay for a year, we'll incentivize you by paying you X
Mhm.
amount, right? So you get your basic salary, but then you get your loyalty bonus on top. So if you stay here for a year, you get, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 euros on top of it or something like that. Now, obviously, we talk about the fundamentals of retention and generally why people stay at companies and things like that. Obviously, career growth opportunities, meaning that's very important. But do you think incentivizing someone with money is the right way to go about it?
I think it's definitely a important factor.
Hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, the way that the company can show you that they believe in you, that they believe you are an important asset to the company, that they believe in your future within the company, is just giving you something back, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's
sure.
other things. There are always other things you can give back. You can provide. training opportunities. You can provide some internal exposure to more complex problems. And I've seen companies relying on that a lot, but at the end, on your salary, nothing changes. And unfortunately, what happens in most companies, I would say 98% of them, it's fairly easy for you to just get a salary, improvement when you just leave the company and join something else,
Yeah,
which is
definitely.
very unfortunate, right? So if let's say you're still super engaged with the company, let's say you were a good employee, you were doing your work, like you were developing yourself, you provide value to your team, and the company sometimes fails to acknowledge that and to perceive that. And you see so many opportunities popping up. You have some nice recruiters just pinging you on LinkedIn, like, okay, I'm gonna hear him out because I'm not
Yeah.
fully happy with my salary.
Yeah.
I think there's some small things. For example, I think equity is it's a debatable thing. I think it's something you
Yeah.
can provide to sometimes employees that are not so senior. You can start with smaller,
Yeah.
packages for equity. But equity is that thing, like you just have to invest in the company so you can get that money back someday.
Yeah.
But some sort of bonus. I've seen like some things. For example, you do get the most promising employees within the company, then create this. We had this thing called Future Leaders Program, which is it's a batch of people that we would get every year to get access to certain privileges. For example, some
Yeah, sure.
specific training sessions, more expensive mentorship with some professionals, and then you would get additional learning budgets as well. You get extended budget for learning as well. But I mean, salary wise, you need to do something about that, because if you
Yeah.
don't see yourself improving, the market is
Yeah.
moving very fast. So unfortunately, you need to find the balance. Like,
Yeah. I've had many a conversation that very similar to what we just discovered. There was that, unfortunately, the reality is that you are much more likely to get a better salary or a better salary increase by leaving your existing job to join somewhere else than you are if you stay where you are and getting incremental salary increases there. Because, as you said, a lot.
And the sad part is you might be trying to hire someone to replace that person. You might have to pay more. So why not just invest on
Exactly. Yeah.
someone that is already
Yeah.
good? There's
Yeah.
zero ramp up time. They're
Exactly.
already producing,
Exactly.
right? So,
Yeah. Exactly. And the time that it takes to hire someone new could be 3 months before you find the right person.
yeah.
They could join, realize after 3 months they're not really happy. It's 9 months, a year down the line,
And
you're in the
then
same.
6 months probation in
Yeah.
Germany. So it's
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
really big investment. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that. But I think one loyalty bonus discretion that I've had is how you structure it. So I've seen two variants really. So either you stay here for a year and then you get 10,000 euros, or we will pay you a 10,000 euro sign-on bonus straight away. However, if you leave after a year, you have to pay that money back.
Well, yeah.
Now, what's your take on that?
I don't like it that much. I think,
Yeah,
of course, we are. I think both. So if both of them, like you have the risk of just getting someone to stay just because they're waiting for that
yeah,
money to just be
yeah,
available. That's always a risk. Um, I think it depends on the context. If you're really desperately need to find someone, you find someone that is at least from your assessment, is a perfect
yeah,
person for the position you're looking for. Offering a sign-on big bonus and having that caveat of, okay, so but if you leave before X amount of
yeah,
months, you would have to pay back. I think it's fair. I think it's you're showing like, okay, I believe in you. I
yeah,
trust you can do the job. I think you can definitely deliver
yeah.
what you're promising. But this is just like a agreement we're making. Like, I trust you. I hope you trust us, and let's just make this
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't know
yeah,
exactly how I would think in real life if I had that situation,
mm.
but it's interesting approach. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't. I think in every like sector of life, there is sometimes never really a perfect answer to it. I think there's pros and cons of
Yeah.
doing it either way. I think if you incentivize someone by saying, "Yeah, stay here," you get this at the end of the year. It's sort of, do they just stay there because they want to get it, or if it also from the other side, you're thinking, like if you're in that situation, like, oh, do I really want to stay here? I'm not really enjoying it, but I've
And
got
also
a payout at the end of it.
it depends on the base salary you're offering as well.
Yeah,
Because if you're
exactly.
offering like a shitty pay, but you're
Yeah,
adding the bonus as a hook for them to join,
yeah,
very risky, very risky.
yeah,
So yeah, it depends on that as
yeah,
well.
sure. Now, something that's also an issue that I've seen across the board is the lack of diversity in the projects that people are working on. So, let's say designer interviews for a specific position. You tell them, right, in the next 6 to 12 months, this is the project you're going to be working on, blah blah blah. That project then comes to an end after that period, and there's not really too much. Maybe it's just about improving that existing feature that they've built, or improving the product that they've worked on over that period of time. But it's a lot about just sort of maintenance work, or just adding a few new features here and there. How much do you think that impacts on designers moving from job to job?
I think a lot, a lot. I
Yeah.
had a friend telling me the other day it was the same situation. They joined this company. They had a lot of work at the beginning,
Mm.
but in their case, I think they had some. They were expecting a little bit more investment to arrive, but it didn't happen. So they couldn't move faster as they were planning to, and she was mostly stuck on the same, just tweaking the same feature over and over for a
Mm.
while, and that drains one's soul for sure. Like, because
Yeah.
you don't see much happening. And just
Yeah.
if you're sitting there just looking at your screen, there's not much to do. Like, this is not good. So
Mm.
I think, again, like on the company side, if that's something it could happen, just be straightforward and just
Yeah.
transparent on. Okay, so we have this big thing. You definitely have worked for 6 to 7 months, the best case scenario.
Mm.
And after that, our hope is, let's say we're going to land some more investment, we're going to improve the product even further. There's a lot more features we want to build.
Mm.
If not, what could happen? So, what is your plan B
Yeah.
regarding that specific designer? So, first of all, should I be concerned with my job? Like, because if you don't have enough demand, I'm just going to be sitting there waiting for you to say, like, we don't need that person anymore. Or I have a plan B, which is like, okay, so there's some discovery work that we can put together. There's a few investigations for these future features that we are thinking about. And once we have the investment, that might
Mm.
be something we're going to be doing. So there's a few things you can get on a designer's plate to get them up and running or moving, even if you don't have like real features coming up. But I would say if features are not being shipped, it will be tricky to retain someone. So you need to be sure as a company, like, do you really need a full-time designer for this position?
Yeah.
Or if you know that you have a specific demand for a specific amount of time, just getting a freelancer or someone with
Mm.
a very
Mm.
limited contract, that's the best thing. Like, just do a limited contract with that
Yeah.
person, acknowledging that this might end, the work might
Yeah.
end. And if something changes, you then can offer
Mm.
a negotiation of the contract. Yeah.
Yeah. I think transparency is key there from start to
Yeah.
finish. I think during interview process you have to be transparent about those things, which often companies aren't, because they want that person to join, so they won't be
Yeah.
transparent about those things. And yeah, I think it's just about stage of the company. If the company is a large company with lots
Yeah.
of different projects, there is multiple opportunities for them to transfer from projects after they finish things, and things like that, or have a bit of a choice initially which one they want to join and start working on. But yeah, I think it's about transparency up front.
And
And also,
also, I think,
yeah,
yeah, sorry, no, on the designer
no
side, I
worries.
think it's important to be open as well, to find opportunities
Yeah.
within the company. I've seen, especially if you're working on cross-functional teams, you do have, you join the company, you are presented to a team, you get to know, you get to build a relationship with them the first 6 months, 7 months, even some friendships on that team.
Mm.
You understand the domain, you're okay, I'm home right now. And then something changes. Let's say that team is no longer, delivering exactly what is the most important thing for the business. I think a designer needs to be very uh, clear to themselves that it's my job to also find the opportunities within the company,
Yeah.
because sometimes, especially in smaller companies, they don't see the designer could help on, let's say,
Yeah.
adjusting processes. We are good as well on that. We can understand, like, okay,
Mm.
so this is like design, service design, and design thinking. There's a lot of
Mm.
techniques we can use to, let's say, I've done that in the past. For example, working with customer care teams to improve the way they're collecting feedback from customers. So stuff that are not related to the shipping
Mm.
features to the product,
Yeah.
that are also related to design. You can dig into those things and find those opportunities
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Very interesting point. So I think sometimes designers are reliant on their company to provide them the opportunities, right? They're
Yeah.
just like, this is drying up now.
It's a
Where do
two-way
I,
street. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
two-way
where do I go
street.
next? But great point about, trying to explore different opportunities there in different areas, how you can add value in different areas across the business, which is great. Last question I just wanted to ask you, in regards to staying at opportunities for a long time. Now, you've been at HelloFresh for 4 years now, fair to say.
4 years. Yeah.
Now, yeah, across the industry, across the board, 4 years is a long time, to stay, especially in tech as a general industry. 4 years is a long time to stay somewhere. Now, we've covered off most of the main sort of areas why we think, what to do to retain staff and what good retention looks like. But what do you think maybe like the key 1 or 2 points for your personal experience as to why you have stayed at HelloFresh for so long.
To me, I think 2 points. I think career prospect. I think when I joined, it was so clear to me the amount of opportunities that were in front of me, like how many, the different amount of things that I could actually do to get this company to move forward and to thrive. So I was really excited. But in combination of that, I think the company also told me back that, okay, we will acknowledge that you are doing good work, and we are going to reward you with salary raises, promotions, and moving you forward, making you more visible, giving you opportunities that are outside of your normal day-to-day work with your squad. So I think the combination of both that made me very keen to. I couldn't see myself leaving because it's just like the company was in a moment of hyper growth. The business itself, it's something that is very easy to fall in love with because it's working with food. I think it's easy to empathize with customers. The value that the product provides is very clear as well. So I think on that part I was done. Normally products would have that problem working with stuff that you don't fully believe. Then you have that extra variable to consider. In my case, I think working with this specific product makes me very excited. But the company was showing me, okay, so I believe that you can do a much better job if you get more opportunities, and then I'm going to give you opportunities, and then it's a cycle. So I think that's really important. Being seen and perceived and acknowledged, I think that's really all human beings. That's what we want, right? So we want to be appreciated for the work we do, and we also like to be given opportunities. And in my case, my biggest opportunity was to engage with other designers and help them to thrive within their careers as well, and show the same opportunities that I was seeing and sharing with them and getting them excited about those things as well. So yeah, I think HelloFresh provided me all of those things. That's why staying for 4 years didn't feel like that. And also I moved from Brazil to work in this company. So I mean, in a way, the company Germany is HelloFresh, and HelloFresh is my new life here. So it's really hard to detach myself from that's crazy.
I think a lot of the key points we covered there about general retention is why you stay there for long. But it's a massive point you made there. Is it was a whole new country, a whole new experience, and it was situational based. They were going through a hyper growth phase when you joined. It was a great experience for you. They supported you during that phase as well. So yeah, well, look, Guilherme, I think we'll wrap it up here. But massively appreciate your time, man. It's been a pleasure having you on. I've loved hearing your
always,
loved hearing your
a pleasure, and I love this initiative. Just keep going and getting some good people to share.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, look, to everyone that's watching, thanks very much for watching. Make sure you check out the other episodes that have been recorded so far. Next episode will be recorded shortly and released in the near future too. But yeah, again, Guilherme, thanks very much for your time, and speak soon.